grass feels funny, Kirby thought. It feels like pants.
Kirby's epic yarn. I don't normally subject myself to pre-release footage and teasers and stuff, nor do I normally pick up games day one. But this game, somehow I saw a video of it just as it was sort of being announced. And the moment I saw this, all I could think was, this game is adorable, I absolutely need this in my life. So I remembered waiting until it launched, and I got it day one, and it is an absolute blast to play. I think pretty much any Wii owner needs to own this game, because it's just delightful. The story follows Kirby. Being the gluttonous pink thing that he is, he sees a magic tomato, which he tries to swallow. It turns out it belongs to some kind of yarn wizard who sucks him up into a sock, which teleports him to the land of all things plush and cuddly, and also turns him into a being comprised entirely of thread, which is weird because he suddenly becomes a 2D object. But that's not all the changes Kirby experiences. Because he's a flat object that lacks any sort of depth whatsoever, he can no longer suck things up, because air passes straight through him. Now, you would think this completely destroys all the established Kirby mechanics at this point, and in a way you're kind of right, because Kirby no longer has the ability to copy powers from enemies. However, I once heard one of the developers talk about how this really is more in line with the actual Kirby mechanics than one might initially think, because it keeps the core aspect of that, which is transformation. But instead of sucking up enemies to transform, you rearrange the shape of your yarn, and suddenly you're doing different things. For example, instead of running, he transforms into a car. When he falls underwater, he turns into a little submarine. And you can find little bits of things that allow you to add more yarn to your mass, which allows you to make bigger, more complex transformations. Like a giant robot, a UFO, and a weird surfing spaceman. Sure. Basically, while Kirby ends up losing his copy ability, he still maintains the initial draw of Kirby itself, which is constantly changing the way you approach things by changing the way, well, Kirby is. It's just a little different than what you're used to is all. And I think this is actually a pretty big and important thing that makes this game great, because it takes what was initially just a visual change to draw you into this game and makes it an entirely mechanical experience. It allows you to experience what it's like to be a person made out of knitting yarn, instead of it just being a game where Kirby just happens to look like knitting yarn because that looks interesting. I mean, it's that too, but still, it's more of a mechanically driven change. There was a great deal of forethought put into it. Which is ironic, because you could argue that this visual style was taken from Yoshi's story and would later be copy and pasted into Yoshi's epic yarn, and it doesn't work there, because that is literally just a visual change. Because if you play Yoshi's epic yarn, you'll notice that this game plays like every other Yoshi game. There's no change, it's just a visual thing, whereas here, it's a driving force that completely changes the experience, and is fantastic for that. Mechanically speaking, it's a very simple platform. You run, you jump, and you can throw a little piece of yourself out there to wind back in and unravel enemies, and more importantly, interact and shape the world around you. Because you're basically on a layered patchwork quilt. You can pull zippers which open up new doors, you can pull threads to open up layers of the quilt so you can go underneath and appear other places. It's really a genuinely charming and beautiful way to use the mechanics that are unique to this style, and I think it works magnificently. But that's not all to Kirby's epic yarn. There's also being a landlord for some reason. Kinda. You get a house which allows you to put various little bits of furniture you've collected in every level down, and make your own custom apartment that has basically no use. But you can go to other tenants' rooms, change them up so that more tenants will move in, and then they'll challenge you to mini-games, which completely recontextualize levels that already exist. For example, the first guy makes you play hide and seek with him and his 5 clones. The second one makes you try and collect X number of collectible beads in an area under a fixed period of time, sort of like a speedrun challenge. And the third one requires you to pick them up and carry them through the level until you put them in a set point. Genuinely, it's fascinating to see them recontextualize existing levels and give you so much more gameplay for it. And there are a metric crap ton of these like bonus side missions, and they ultimately allow you to unlock more backgrounds and stuff for your own apartment. So it's a system that sort of services itself. That said, and we come to the first of what I can assure you is very few complaints about this game. First of all, there's just so many of them that it feels like it gets really boring, and even though it recontextualizes the levels, they're still the same levels you've already gone through, and if you're going through all these mini games, you're going to be going through every level like dozens of times. It's ridiculous. And maybe it would have been too much to ask, but maybe cut down the number of those and maybe just give us some more core levels. Seriously, I love the levels in this game, but it feels like they could have just chopped this entire aspect up and made it like 3 times longer. There's just so many of these mini games and they just feel so inconsequential. The second complaint I have about this game, and it's actually kind of a fractured complaint here, is there is no difficulty in this game whatsoever. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, it is inherently a very simple game, but to a fault. First of all, there is absolutely zero failure state in this game. You can drop yourself down a pit, you can get hit by enemies, all it will do is cost you your collectible beads. Now those beads are important for getting high ranks on various levels, because the more you collect and the more shiny stars you collect, it affects a combo multiplier, which allows you to get a higher score, and if you get a higher score, you get different medals for every level. However, the only levels I found where this was actually important were the boss fight levels, because if you get a higher rank on the boss fight levels, you unlock 2 more levels for every world. So there's actually a value to that. But even so, even if you get hit and you lose your combo multiplier, it's a very lenient system, so you can lose all of that stuff and very easily still get a gold rank on any level, with very little issue. Which leads me to probably my biggest complaint about this game, and it's gonna be a little weird, and that is, I think this is a terrible game for kids. Now I know what you're saying. Fury, what are you talking about? This is probably the perfect game for kids. It's bright, it's colorful, it's incredibly simple, it's fun, it's cute, and it's easy. But that's also kind of my point. Now, maybe it's because I'm a guy who grew up with the Sega Master System, which had a bunch of games that were derived from the arcades. They were games that kicked you in the stomach, kicked you while you were down, and then kicked sand on you, and laughed at you the entire way. Because they were originally designed in the arcades to get as much money out of you as possible by beating you to death pretty much from the start. But Kirby's Epic Yarn is literally the antithesis of it. There is no way to lose. It feels like a game where everything and anything is just handed to you. There's no challenge, there's no opposition. And while this might seem like it's initially a great game for kids, I think when you make a game for kids, you have a responsibility to those kids to challenge them and to make them learn at least a little bit. I'm not saying make it, say, an edutainment game by any means, but a game like this feels like it's going to teach kids that you don't ever have to put in any effort in anything, and you're going to get everything you want. There's never going to be a challenge for you, and everything is just going to be awesome for you. And maybe it's just because I'm an adult who's been beaten down by life and still is on a daily basis, but that's not how things are. And if you get a kid playing this, and honestly, I think it's kind of worrisome if you give a kid this. And I've seen a lot of games do this recently, like Mario has that gold Tanuki suit that gives you like unlimited energy, unlimited flight, and just makes you invincible. Stop designing games around that. I'm not saying make them like arcade games, that's like the complete opposite effect, but you have to make them at least challenge the player in at least some way. Because you need to be challenged and you need to learn in order to grow as a person, and it sounds like a weird thing to attribute games to, but the fact that they're constantly challenging you to come up with new strategies and new ways to tackle challenges really does affect the way you end up developing mental processes and indeed the ability to act on them. It really does change the way you approach problems and how you act as a person. And losing your combo multiplier, that really isn't it, especially when it's as lenient a system as it is. And that's really the biggest issue I have with this game, is what people who play this game might end up taking away, especially if you're either very, very young or you're an older gamer who just is going to throw this away saying, this is just dumb, it's easy, there's no challenge here, and if there's no challenge, what point is there to doing it? And it's a damn shame I have to say that about this game, because other than that, there's not really much I can fault this game for. I mean, I'm really racking my brain. The only thing else I can maybe complain about is some of the more complex transformations require you to use the Wii Remote in really gimmicky bad ways. For example, there's like a train transformation where you have to point the Wii Remote at the screen to draw tracks for it, and that doesn't really work all that well. That transformation has terrible hit detection as well, in addition to just generally breaking the natural flow of the game. It just kind of comes across as awkward, especially when the natural control scheme is holding the Wii Remote sideways and suddenly you have to swap to pointing at the screen, and oh god, now I'm getting flashbacks to Metroid Other M. Ugh. but for the most part, it works. There's very little for me to really complain about it, aside from what people are going to take away from playing this game. And ultimately, when you're finished playing, there isn't anything but what you take away from it. And that can be a very damning thing about this game, is it just does not take responsibility for the youngsters it's trying to appeal to. Well, that got kind of serious for a minute, but if nothing else, it's fun. Now, the overall presentation too, Kirby's Epic Yarn is amazing. It's very, very unique, and as I said, it's not just a visual thing, it's also an intelligent mechanical change that completely changes the way you approach a Kirby game. To the point where I would argue this isn't even really a Kirby game, but once again, Kirby's being the giant experimental guinea pig that he is, I guess. Seriously, Nintendo, start respecting this guy. He's awesome. But visuals are pretty great. Everything is cute and awesome. And like I said when I first saw visuals of this game is absolutely adorable. I just want to hug everything in this game. It's just amazing. And the audio design is equally tremendous. Every world in Patchland has its own unique theme, and every area in that world takes a different spin on it. Sure, you get a few that feel completely out of place, like my favorite song in the game, Melody Town, just feels completely disconnected from the rest of the, food world it's centered in, but for the most part all the worlds feel like they're connected audibly, and every area in each world feels like it's part of a greater world because of audible continuity, and it all sounds amazing, leading to an overall tremendous presentation. Now, if you want to get a copy of Kirby's Epic Yarn, it will cost you about $14 to $20, and for that price it's an excellent game. I think it's fun, it's unique, and it is truly its own thing that makes it really indicative of the Wii. I mean, once you get past all the shovelware, there's a lot of things that are just completely Wii, and I think this one is perfect for that. And while it's not challenging, and if you get this for your kids, maybe balance out this purchase by getting them a copy of Fantasy Zone 2 or something that's, actually going to challenge them and make them grow as people, I think this game is great for pretty much anyone. And if you have a Wii, Kirby's Epic Yarn is kind of a must-have, because Kirby's Epic Yarn is a game that you just want to hug.
Kirby and Fluff came upon a cake the size of a mountain. It was breathtaking. Kirby tried to contain himself, but failed. He dove right in and started gobbling up the cake. I declare a cake-eating duel. And with that, Prince Fluff jumped into the cake as well. The two ate and ate and ate, but they didn't balance their eating very well. Whoa! And before they could get down, the cake collapsed with them inside it. Oh, I can't eat another bite. Prince Fluff moaned as he rubbed his cake-filled belly. But then, Kirby appeared with a huge cherry in his mouth. Gulp! Kirby won the contest, and a looming tummy ache as well.